grew up in the Marine Corps, like I said. My dad was a wonderful guy. He'd been through Guadalcanal, lost a squad, and he had buddies from the Second World War. And I watched that and witnessed that as a little boy. Of course, he also had nightmares every night from his violent experience at Guadalcanal. It was a horrific experience for him and a lot of other Marines. It was just really ugly. But, guys made it. Some guys made it. They gotta live with it afterwards. Sometimes it's not easy, either because of emotional damage, psychological damage, physical damage. How do you come back? It's difficult sometimes to figure where political-oriented films or whatever you want to call it, usually they wait like 10 years. I'm trying to think how would you look at a subject like that. They timed it so that it was right in tune with the beginning of a transition from the war. And it took steps on film that I thought were very courageous and yet very, very important, because other than television exposure, which was traumatizing, I thought, through story and form, it brought people a lot closer to understanding, and accepting the war in Vietnam. Every community went through changes. Friends of mine, my best friend was shot and killed at Kent State. Oh, there was just repercussions. Just the most incredible people while we were there, and we were introduced and brought into the community. It was days of shooting and partying. It was a sense of filming a wedding and having a wedding. It was under control, but it was also a lot of fun. It was organized party. We were singing, dancing, hanging out, hugging, meeting people, talking. When we first met each other again on the field, I had been away from the guys for a while, and I got to Thailand and up on the River Kwai and the little camp and this and that. And I don't know if I saw too much of people, the guys, Chris and Robert, Bobby, and Michael, until I got choppered into the mountains to go to the set to where we see Bobby in the movie. And it's like real. And all of a sudden, whoa, I hit the ground right away. And we were showered with shrapnel. We got the whole field had been wired to be exploded after we shot our scenes. For what we shot, I guess was part of the movie. We hit the ground, and then they cut that and show the film, not with us in it, of the field blowing up. But it was hundreds of charges. It scared the hell out of everybody. For a second, we were powerless over this, and stuff fell on everybody. Without our gear on, we might have gotten damaged, something, but phew. And then, oh, hi, Bobby. I was having fun. I was excited. I was thrilled. I was scared. I was all right. I was okay, I'm okay. It's gonna be all right. I'm buzzed, man. I was so high on this experience and fear and excitement. And shoot, man, I've been to basic training as a kid. Whoa, you get some of those high-pitched DIs, get you guys going, man. You get your butt in gear, get your stuff going. You got these guys going in there. You got a bunch of 18, 17-year-old guys in there, wide-eyed and buzzing. And it's like that. We're lucky we had some near-death experiences while working, and because we had good people working there in those technical areas, I myself, because I was next to someone who was responsible while I'm hanging 60 feet over water, and a helicopter that I'm hanging from is ready to crash. Because I had somebody next to me, whether he was mad at me because I was still in character or whatever. I followed direction at that point and did the best we could, and the chopper's blades were just tipping the edges of the cable that it had caught on. It was pulling tight. It was barely stable and was going to fall, and we're underneath it on the other cable, way above the river. And a conversation took place in probably under a second as to what to do next. Bobby was pretty pissed off, I remember. I looked at him as the character and called him by his name. What do we do? What do we do? Get out of character. He's screaming. He's looking at the helicopter blades and just going back and forth and tipping. I says, what do we do? We drop 75 feet? You know, are we going to fall on rocks? Are we going to fall? Everything had been planned. This hadn't. Well, you could see rocks in different spots right below us, and tree stumps, and all kinds of possibilities of that coming down. You go first. Okay, you go. Yeah, we dropped and just fell underwater. There was a sunken longboat. I remember hitting that underwater after we dropped. We went way under. And I hit that and came up underneath and came up and got my breath. And there behind us, I saw Bobby. He'd gone ashore. He'd gotten his direction. He's yelling at me. And come over, come on. And the helicopter had come down, and I think it was Chuck Waters. I may have stuntmen's names confused. They're all brilliant and great. Had been inside the helicopter, crawled out on the strut, lifted the cable off, holding on to the helicopter strut, pushed it off, freed the helicopter. Bobby, I sat on the edge, watched this heroic, attempt, and well, I guess that's the last shot for that one, I remember Bobby picking me up out of the water when my legs were broken after I fell. This is an actor. And you saw my bone broken in my leg. I saw it too. I almost passed out. But he picked me up, put me over his shoulder. Now there's a hill they were going to film me being carried. And they can only use that much. He carried me through mud and broken trees and branches. After they said cut, he went and climbed and continued and climbed. Now, at that time, I wasn't as heavy as I am now. But he did it once. He did it twice. He did it 3 times. He did it 4 times. And I could see it was something more than just acting and we're doing a scene and, I'm tired now, let's take a rest or something. No. Somebody's got to be carried and somebody's got to carry. It was a great experience. The hospital, I fit right in. I felt a community of people, and they didn't know I wasn't crippled. I was in a wheelchair that was manufactured to look like I was crippled and lost my legs. I adapted to that. It's easier for someone to have an identity and strength and courage, clarity in their life, because they know their limits somehow a little better. They know their boundaries. They're willing to extend themselves a little further. But the world outside sometimes was limited, was difficult. There were people I met in the hospital that were never going to leave. That was it. It just was a world, it was safe. It was a safe place. It was just, for whatever reason, they just didn't have the ability. It wasn't, you couldn't change that point of view. I had nothing to do with the movie. And after the screening, I think we got invited either to John's house or the English producer with a beautiful wife from Southeast Asia. And she was making dinner, and just myself and my wife at the time, and John, and she snuck the music on, and we're talking about the movie and what a great movie it was. And I heard that music. I don't know.
I don't make movies intellectually. I don't make movies to make a point. I make movies to tell stories about people. It was a totally convoluted thing with the EMI, and they decided to take a foray into movies, and they only made 3, I think, and this was one of them. This is the one they expected to be the least successful and turned out to be the most. So I just came up with this idea, the Deer Hunter, and I made a 1-hour presentation verbally, which I was used to doing at that time. And you often did that. You went into a studio head and you told them the story, because they hate to read. They still hate to read. They always hated to read. Dino De Laurentiis says, I never read the book until after I make it the movie. I said, look, guys, if you want to do it when you want to do it, I have to prepare the movie at the same time. I have to cast it, I have to scout it. I've got to go all over the world. I've got to go to Thailand, I've got to go here, I've got to go there, I've got to go to the mountains, steel mills, I'm going to be on the road. I need some help with the screenplay. I can't do it all by myself. So I brought in a guy I knew from New York. I immediately went out on the road, and he was supposed to be working off my premise that I presented in front of Dale Olson. And I call him every single night from the road, from Ohio and from Pittsburgh and from steel mill towns and from East Chicago. And I mean, for example, I called him the night I went to a Serbian wedding in Ohio, and I saw the bride and groom drinking from that double cup that John Savage does, and if you spill a drop, you both drink, and it's bad luck, and if you don't, and of course he spills a drop, he says, listen, I saw it, you've got to put it in the script now, give him dialogue in it. And I was giving him everything verbatim on the phone at night, and when I came back and I read it, and I just could not believe what I read. It was written by somebody who was mentally deranged. And I went to see him at the Marquee, totally stoned on scotch and out of his frigging mind. I said, how could you get it so wrong? I said, I was calling the dialogue into you at night. And he started crying and screaming and yelling, and he said, I can't take the pressure, because we were under the gun. We had to get the script ready. And I have to go home. He's like a big baby, and I said, well, pal, there's a ticket waiting for you. Pick it up tomorrow. And then I had the awful chore of writing the screenplay myself, because we sent him home after 6 weeks. And I had to write the thing on buses, on trains, on cars, at night in motels, and I worked like a dog. Nobody can say they wrote a 3-hour, 45-minute movie in 6 weeks with the depth of the Deer Hunter. It's impossible. The first person we approached was De Niro. He's the only one who saw the script. And he insisted before he committed to seeing the location. So I had to take him to all the steel mills. I even had him sleep over a steel worker's house. And the guy who plays Chuck, the big guy, he was actually a guy showing us around a mill in East Chicago. He didn't have any idea of even who we were, because I introduced Bob as his agent, Harry Ufflin at the time. This is Harry Ufflin. And then we went to a steel worker's bar afterward, and because they're open 24 hours, because the mills are going 24 hours on 3 shifts. And Bob leans over to me, and he says, Mike, why don't we put this guy in the movie? So I said to Chuck, his name is Chuck Asperger, and I said, Chuck, how'd you like to be in a movie? He said, what? He said, who are you guys? It was like a line from Butch Cassidy. I said, well, this is Robert De Niro. And he said, no, shit. He said, yeah, we'd like you to be in this movie. He said, well, fuck. He said, if you guys are crazy enough to ask me, I'm crazy enough to do it. And then I saw Meryl do, on 3 days' notice, Breck's Happy End. She replaced Shirley Knight at the Brooklyn Academy, and very few people know how well she dances and sings. I mean, she should have done Moulin Rouge. She would have been fantastic. And then I saw her, I said, Meryl. And then we were casting for the part of Nick, And we must have seen thousands of people. We were at the William Morris Agency in New York, and my partner, Joanne, and she said, here, she had a little piece of paper, and she folded it up, and she said, stick this in your pocket. I said, what is it? She said, just stick it in your pocket. Don't. So I looked at hundreds of actors that day. I was so dragged. We went from 7 in the morning till about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. I saw so many people I couldn't remember who was who. And at the end of the day, I had the most stupendous migraine, and I said to Joanne, Joanne, I don't know, who should be Nick? And she said, you know the little piece of paper I gave you? I said, yeah. She said, well, open it up. So I had to search for where I put it, opened it up, and it says Christopher Walken is Nick. Well, John was wonderful, you know, because he was dying of cancer. And he and Meryl were boyfriend and girlfriend, and they were devoted to each other. On the set, Meryl was present every time John was shooting. And John wanted to do it because he wanted to act with Bobby, because even though they had been in Godfather, they never had a scene together. So he wanted to do it, but he was reluctant because he knew he was dying. And he said, Michael, I have cancer. I said, I don't care, John. You have cancer. And he said, okay. He said, if you're willing to take a shot, I'll do it. And just before we started shooting, the morons at EMI, these so-called producers, just before we start shooting, these idiots come to me and say, you know, you've got to fire John Cazale. And I said, why? And they said, well, you know, he's got cancer and he might die in the middle of the movie. I said, I'm not going to fire him. I said, if you fire John, you fire me. I'm out. Forget it. They said, well, then you have to write another script. I said, what are you talking about? They said, you have to write an alternative script. I said, what for? They said, in case he dies. Can you imagine? And they said, in case he dies, we have to, you know, be able to shoot around him dying, explain it. So I cobbled together some absolute dreadful piece of shit, you know, and I gave it to them, and that made them happy, and we did the movie, and God bless John, he finished it. Sadly, he died shortly thereafter, you know, and Meryl spent the last month, I think, in the hospital with him. And it was one of his great performances, and he was a lovely guy to work with. I had the greatest admiration for him. And there was one really great anecdote when Bobby comes back from Vietnam, and they go back up hunting. And he's with John. And John starts fooling around with a revolver and starts kidding around about Russian roulette. And Bob, of course, has come from this dreadful thing over there with Chris Walken. And he freaks. And he puts the gun to John's head. So we're getting ready to do the scene, and Bobby comes to me and he said, Mike, he said, you know, I think I could do the scene better if we put a real round in the gun. I said, I beg your pardon, Bob. He said, shh. He said, don't. He said, I just think I could do a better job if we have a real round in the gun. I said, Bob, we're playing Russian roulette. He said, yeah, but you could rig it, you know, do something. I said, well, I have to ask John. He said, okay, go ask. And go to John. I said, John, I got a weird request from Bob. He said, what is it? I said, he'd like to put a live round in the gun. He didn't bat an eye. He just said, he always had this incredibly thoughtful look, and he said, well, he said, okay, I can go along with that. But that was John Cazale. He was just the sweetest guy. He's a sweetheart. I do have buried in my files, I mean, I do have some clippings, press clippings, from newspapers in Singapore that this actually took place during the war. But more importantly, you know, I mean, they say it was true, and everybody says it was, you know, pure reinvention. I think that's beside the point. The real point I had using it was, how do you dramatize war? The main element of combat is waiting, because a firefight usually is fierce, unbelievably insane, and is over in a very short space of time. And then you're either dead, you're a paraplegic, or you're alive. One of the three. There's no in between. And it happens like lightning. The rest of the time, you're waiting for random death. So, as a purely dramatic problem, how do you demonstrate the terror of waiting for random death? How do you do it? You can't do an Andy Warhol thing like sleep, showing 12 hours of somebody sleeping. You can't show 12 hours of somebody waiting. I mean, they're only the theater. Now, what better way to show the tension of random death than Russian roulette? Because you don't know. One pull of that trigger and you're gone, or you're not. It's as close as I could come to dramatically being as powerful about combat, real combat, as possible. One funny incident was, you know, when the guys escaped down the river on the log. We sped down the river, and the log was flying literally to the South China Sea in free fall. And we caught up with the raft, and I said, Bobby, get on the goddamn log. Chris, get on the log. John, they clambered out of the boats onto the log, and I told Vilmos, I said, just start rolling the cameras. Roll the goddamn cameras. And he started rolling the cameras, and then no sooner did he do that the raft got caught in a whirlpool and started rotating, going in circles, and the boats are going in circles. We're trying to stay out of each other's way. And in the middle of all that, suddenly, because the teak is so damn heavy, it's like a hunk of iron, the bamboo undercarriage cracks in half. So the four ends are sticking out of the water. And we're spinning around, and the boats are spinning around. So 3 stuntmen, the stunt coordinator, 2 stunt guys, and myself dove into the quay, and we each pulled down a corner by hand. And we tried to keep our nose just above the water to breathe while this goddamn thing is spinning down the river, you know, and Vilmos is shooting. And I'm screaming at the actors' directions, and Vilmos is turning the camera, and we're flying down the river, you know, and suddenly one of the boats, Vilmos runs right over me, right over the top of my head, drowning me. But the actors are great because they really, I told them when we go to the jungle, because we started in Bangkok, I said, when we go to the jungle, I don't want you guys to change your clothes. I don't want you to take a shower for a month. I don't want you to shave. I said, I just want you to eat rice. I don't want you to drink. And they did it. They never changed their clothes. They smell like garbage dumps, the 3 of them. And they really jumped from that chopper. That's them. There's no stunt people. I know because I was in the chopper with a uniform on, and Vilmos was right behind me, and I had fatigues on and a watch, and it's my hand pulling them on board. The Thai pilots were getting tired because we've been working all day. And again, it was the next to last day, and we saved all the hard stuff to the end in case anybody got injured. And without anybody realizing it, the Thai pilot his foot was getting tired, so that the left side of the chopper was starting to tilt. And what happened was he was kind of oscillating, you know, forward and backward, and he didn't realize the angle he was at. And the tip of the runner is curved up, just got a little teeny tiny curve. And that curve caught under the cable of the bridge. And what we didn't realize in his attempt to, you know, stay up, he was lifting the cable of the bridge. Now with the chopper at a, 30-degree angle, 25-degree angle, if you do your geometry, the width of the blade coming close to the curve of the cable was like a hair's breadth. So in about a second, we would have all been incinerated. And I heard all kinds of screaming on the radio, and it was my guy talking to the translator, talking to the other translator, talking to the guy. And I actually had to climb out onto the runner and with my hand physically pull the cable off the edge of the lip of the runner so that the chopper would stabilize again. And we almost lost it. That was pretty damn close. The night we finished dubbing it was at Sony. It was at 3 o'clock in the morning. And by then I had seen the movie 459 and a half times. And, you know, after you look at a 3 hour, 40-minute movie that many times, we ran it at that hour after the final dub, and everybody, including myself, thought it was a disaster. So they got the publicity guys, and they got them all mumbling in the front, you know, and then the scene comes up where Bob shoots the deer. And I hear, that's it. We lost the audience. It's all over. And we're dead. We should stop the movie at the end of the wedding. I said, Ned, you can't do that. It's only an hour. You can't have an hour movie. I mean, it's ridiculous. So God bless him, Lou Wasserman. I go to him, and Lou says, look, we'll have 2 different previews. And whichever preview is better, that's the print we'll go with. So we decided we'd go to Cleveland, where we'll show a shorter version, which I cut down. And then we'll go to Chicago and show the longer version. And whichever one gets the best reception, that's the one we go with. So I had an idea. I said, you know, there's just a chance these people might like the short version, and we're going to be. So I arranged with the projectionist. I went up, gave him a few bucks. I don't know what I gave him, $50. I said, look, why don't you do me a favor? I said, halfway through the movie, I said, jam the projector so the film burns. So everybody's watching it, they're really into it, they're loving the movie, the whole thing. All of a sudden, you know, what happens when the film gets stuck and it gets, you know, and it curls and gets white. And the audience goes, oh. So the house lights come up, takes them a half hour to splice the film back together again and start, you know. And I knew by then they had forgotten what the movie was about. So they ran the rest of the movie, and of course it got a dreadful score. And then when we went to Chicago, I let the movie run, and that of course got the good score, and Lou said, we're running the long version. You know, we had a run in Westwood at the National, like, for 10 days to qualify for Academy Awards. So the first night, we're running the movie. And I don't know at what point in the movie, Penny comes up to me, Robert Shaw's daughter, Penny, and she says, I think you better come back. What's wrong? You know, I thought there was some disaster related to the movie. She said, women are passing out in the ladies' room. They're throwing up. They're passing out. They're crying. We have to get paramedics here. And I couldn't believe it. Then I knew we were a hit. I was just pleased that people weren't listening to all that rhetoric from Jane Fonda, you know. He kept calling me a fascist right-winger and singing God Bless America, how dare I do that? And she didn't say one word to me backstage at the Academy Award. Hanoi Jane didn't show up at the dedication of the Vietnam War Memorial, which I did. I didn't tell anybody I went. But I had a call from Washington after the movie opened. This guy, the guy who got the thing funded, called me and said, Michael, I just saw Deer Hunter. I'm going to get a memorial fund, and I'm going to get a memorial made. And I'm proudest of that. One of the reasons Deer Hunter works is because it's really ensemble, unselfish ensemble work with everybody not trying to be the star, but supporting everybody else. It wasn't a movie. As everybody said to me who worked on it, it was real.
I was involved from the very beginning, and this is like, and I mean, I enjoyed it because it's like making a movie in Europe. The director starts working with the cameraman, way before the shooting starts. And I remember going into Thailand to check the locations out, which where we actually shot the Vietnam sequences. We also went to Pittsburgh and we checked out the locations, and we made some preparations. We had a lot of problem with the weather situation because we had to shoot this movie like it starts in October or September, the hunting season. And of course, like in Hollywood always, you shoot a winter movie, you start in the summer. Or you shoot a summer movie, you have to shoot it in the winter. So whenever the money is ready to do a movie, that's when we start making a movie. So we started Deer Hunter, actually, if I remember correctly, it was April or May. The leaves just were coming out on the trees, and everything was green and gorgeous and beautiful. And for the movie, we didn't want that kind of a look. We wanted to have the fall look. We have wanted the desaturated look. We wanted to make it look like we are in a smoky steel mill town, where there's not much color in there. Everything is work, and then we see them, how they entertain themselves, and they get into a wedding, and so on. So for the color scheme, we wanted desaturated, dark colors. So what we are going to do with those trees? So we have to take the leaves off of the trees. That's not an easy job. Just think about some horrendous big trees, and people had to take the leaves down one by one. The wedding scene was quite interesting, and in the script, it didn't really look much actually, because the whole sequence maybe was like, I would say 4 or 6 pages. It's not much dialogue there, if you recall. It's a lot of action, dancing, and happening, and falling on the ground, and nobody ever thought that sequence is going to end up as a 40-minute sequence in a movie. 40 minutes is almost like the whole movie, and this is just part of the movie, which it doesn't really even belong into the real story what's happening in the movie. But I think Michael thought that this was the most important part of the movie, to establish the characters. The studio certainly hated it. So they were trying to cut that down, and the editor was sort of behind the scenes actually cutting his own version of this movie, a short version, which at the wedding maybe was 10 minutes or something like that. And Michael Cimino didn't know about it. And at the time when he found out, actually, he immediately fired the editor, and ironically, the editor got the Academy Award for Best Editing. So that shows, what he thought that was going to be the best side. So, Michael Cimino was a difficult person. A lot of people could not work with him, but I found him very, very talented, and I always like to work with talented people, and if they have any personality problems, I can get over those so easy, because I always look at the man as an artist and what he can do on the screen, and he certainly could put images up on the screen, I love improvisation in movies. I mean, even then, today is almost like passe, that you are thinking about handheld cameras and just you'll catch, what's happening on the screen and all that. But in those days, actually, it was interesting to see a director who encouraged the actors to not follow the lines sometimes, and not follow the script, and just try to do something better if you can. And certainly Robert De Niro was an actor who always experiments in movies, and he loves to work that way, and all the ensemble that. The color scheme during the war scenes and in the Vietnam scenes actually stayed pretty much in the desaturated column. It was we did mostly with selecting the wardrobe of the people, because the terrain was really didn't matter too much, because it was pretty neutral. But what we actually did was to desaturate the colors and make it more like newsreel photography was that we pushed the film to the limit. I remember pushing the film 2 stops and overdeveloping it. What has been, when you are pushing a film, that means that you are underexposing it. And you have to develop it longer in the chemicals in order to get the exposure on the negative. But that also creates grain in the film and desaturation. So the colors actually may be muted and it will be sort of looking more like a black and white image with some color. And it worked pretty good also because we had some usual footage what we had to use because we could not recreate the Vietnam War, I mean, this was not a big budget movie, so to speak, like when you have hundreds of millions of dollars to really build cities and war scenes and all that. So we could not do that. But we had to use some of this 16 millimeter footage what the newsreel cameraman did in Vietnam. And when that's blown up to 35 and anamorphic, you can imagine that how grainy that is. And in order to match that level, but we had to really destroy our pure, beautiful Eastman color negative, to the point when it will look like it's a blow up. There was another big scene actually we shot at night. It's the refugees leaving the city in Vietnam. And we had to shoot it at night because I think the location, what we were using in Bangkok, it didn't really look too much like Vietnam. I think at night it was, much better resembling more Saigon than during the day. And we didn't have enough power actually to light up a huge area. We were seeing actually the river, a bridge, and miles away, you see houses. We wanted to light up windows. We had explosions in the background. Remember, no, those days we didn't have any digital effects. We could not just put in later on, explosions. We could have probably, but we decided that we have to do it ourselves. So we had our own special effects men actually during the shot doing explosions like miles away, and see the flames going up and the smoke and all that. And but we could not really light up the whole river area, and then we were struggling for light. Generators went on. We used local generators, and some of them went on, and they didn't work. So we had to open up the lenses as far as we could, shoot wide open, and pray that something is going to be on the negative. And that's why, when you look at that sequence, it looks real because I think in a war they would not be able to use actually lights. They would have to just shoot whatever is there, and I think it looks real because of the darkness, because you don't see really everything clearly, but you have a good feeling about what's happening. In the big hallway, with the archway, one single light bulb in the middle of the room. It's very exciting actually because that looked like a painting, we had to add some light, that's the magic, of movies that you can cheat, you can make it look like it's coming from yourself. And quite often we would try to do the one light thing, one light bulb thing, and I did that in the scene when going up to the prostitute's room who has a baby. There's a little fight going on between them, and the light suddenly starts swinging around in the room. And we really shot that with that one light bulb because it would have been very, very difficult to recreate that with regular light, added lights, because there would be shadows from the swinging lights. So it was quite interesting that how scary that was actually for me, because it was really the exposure was really on the bottom. And that, it was just like, and the film always had to travel from Thailand to Hollywood, to the laboratory. And usually exposure can go away, in a couple of days of traveling time. That little exposure might disappear from the film. It happens quite often. And I remember that the lab was not really happy with that negative. And they said, it's really, we think it's unusable. You should really try to reshoot it. And of course, we didn't have a chance to reshoot it, and Michael said, well, if it's not good, it's not going to be in the movie. And that's it. But then when we saw it, it was just perfect again, because it's really, it's like real reality, like it was just like not a movie, like you are really capturing the real thing. And certainly the scene stands out for me when Christopher Walken dies in Robert De Niro's arms, when he shoots himself, in the bullet. And that scene was never really rehearsed at all. It was, we just set up two cameras and in two handheld cameras, and Michael just told us, that's what happens, that exactly, he kills himself, and then he falls off, and the Niro jumps over there, and we'll hold him up. That's it. And then we had to find our position, when that happened. And we also were told that we might not have a take two. And that's exactly what happened, that the whole acting was so intense, so incredible. And we captured it, with two cameras. And it was no reason to repeat it. And I don't think that could have repeated it. And I had my doubts many times when I read the script that how can this be done, that the people are going to accept that, like the ending of the movie, when our actors, our characters are on the table after the funeral, and they are actually singing God Bless America. I thought, when I read the script, this is going to be so corny, it's going to be like, God, this patriotic bullshit, and all that. And I said, Michael, how can you get away with it? I mean, you sure that you want to do that? And, he just said, he was laughing. He said, you know what? Why don't you wait until the actors are going to do this scene and then tell me, I mean, your criticism is really corny or not, And then he was damn right, because when they did that scene, it was just like everybody was crying, on the set. It's like in a movie theater when the people are coming out of the theater there to see them, very touched, beautiful scene. It was definitely the most challenging film in my life, and it was the most complicated in a way also, because it was playing in Pennsylvania. We went up to the state of Washington, to the mountain scenes, and then we had to go to Thailand for the Vietnam scenes. I mean, every day we had some interesting sequence which didn't really look like the sequence before what we shot. So film is like a big mosaic, that it has so much color in it and so much happening in it, and so many faces, so many great actors, we had in the movie. So it was very challenging just to think about that to tell the story in a way, that people will feel that they are there. And it was an honest picture. I think that's how I can say that. It's when you see that movie, it's really how I think movies should be made.